I often remind colleagues in New York that, and we're very close, here we are in New York City, but we opened in the Congo before we opened a bank in Connecticut. So our presence in Africa goes back a long way and is one that's ingrained in many of us at Citigroup. And so it's an area that will continue to grow for us and expand. And of course, I often make claim that while we're in 16 countries, my colleagues, one of the things we really produced were a lot of good bankers that are running other banks. I see Arnold Eckby and others here who are colleagues of the past. And so I make claim to many more countries and good deeds in Africa's business circles. But I think what excited us about this award was the fact that it was focused on entrepreneurs and to enhance the quality and the visibility of small and medium enterprises, which is so important for Africa and for its growth. And our commitment is a long one in terms of Millennium Development Goals, but I think we'll sense where we feel we add the most value. And we were early as one of the first U.S. bank to sign on to the UN Global Compact back in early 2010, and we remained very committed. But we look at very much the success of some countries in Africa and others in Asia and elsewhere, of the hope for much more dramatic economic growth, which we're seeing, to help really to deliver the results that will bring many more people out of poverty and help deliver to the Millennium Development Goals for Africa. Even if Africa captured only a small percentage more of global trade, it would make a big difference. In 2008, 1% of global trade was worth $195 billion, more than 5 times development assistance to sub-Saharan Africa. So we must look at how business and trade can stimulate growth and help drive change and people out of Africa. For example, last week, the IFC, Citigroup, and the African Development Bank agreed to provide up to $300 million in incremental trade finance for exporters and importers into Africa to help boost growth. And we believe that growth, economic growth, is going to be one of the very important contributors to delivering on the Millennium Development Goals. Microfinance, for us, is an integral part of development with Africa, and it's in the process of making and delivering on some of the development goals. It is an area that Citi has had a very long history in its philanthropic work, but it's also one which about 5 years ago we believed would take our businesses and using our capital and our local franchises to help partner with institutions to reach many, many more people than we as large commercial banks have been able to in Africa, and that including small businesses and enterprises. And the microfinance sector has weathered the global downturn extremely well. And in Africa, we saw in 2009 growth that was about 25% over the previous year. So we again see the opportunity of growth and financial inclusion as a way of contributing to some of the goals, particularly the eradication of extreme poverty in trying to secure and stabilize incomes for many people who have not had access. And of course, we believe in doing this through partnership. Almost all that we've done, whether in a philanthropic, but more importantly on a commercial basis, has been in working with local institutions and from our local footprint in Africa. And I think that partnership is key to how all of us can leverage what we all deliver on. But Africa, even for areas like microfinance, are still very underdeveloped. And we believe that although we work with about 13 institutions in 9 countries and increasing quite significantly, that is just the beginning of a much more important network for advancing and reaching into urban and rural poor communities that we should leverage as in partnership together. And we've done a lot of that with organizations, some of them here, but also OPIC, the IFC, and multilaterals like the African Development Bank. So finally, our belief in delivering on the Millennium Development Goals is one of how do we contribute through partnership and through economic growth, trade, investment, our continued presence in Africa, and the expansion of our businesses to bring more economic growth to the many who have not been included thus far.
Well, I think, as I spoke earlier, microfinance around the world has been an institutional building capacity. You've seen it in the large institutions, but who have demonstrated the viability and the scale, the potential scale of what would have been only referred to as the informal sector before. We see it at much larger numbers in Asia and Latin America, but we see it emerging very quickly in Africa too. The growth of microfinance institutions, which have very focused and dedicated credit and product that are best delivering in many cases to rural and small enterprises. And I think there the partnership comes in about funding and helping those institutions access capital and funding in the domestic markets to grow. In a number of countries, such as in Kenya, we see microfinance institutions getting banking licenses, and very importantly, being able to take deposits and make payments transfers, not just make credit. And then finally, I think there are a number of leading domestic banks and groups such as EcoBank, Equity Bank, and others that are going deeper with dedicated units and focusing on small enterprise and microfinance. And that's a very important component of achieving scale.
Doing business in Africa, you can't afford to be without Africa Investor.